November is National Responsible Gambling Month. Now, financial pressures and the COVID-19 pandemic have meant more problems with gambling. One of the harmful effects of gambling is gender-based violence. Executive Director of the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation, Sibongile Simelane-Quntana, joins me now via Skype, and she is here in Johannesburg. Ms. Simelane-Quntana, thank you very much for your time. Before you tell us about why it is that gender-based violence appears to be one of the most harmful effects of gambling, talk to us first about this study that you have conducted and what it springs up mostly for you as red flags.
Hi, Xoli, and good afternoon to your listeners. This study was actually conducted by international researchers in the United States and Australia. So we looked at various studies that have been conducted. We also conducted a socio-economic impact study for the KwaZulu-Natal Gambling Board. And what springs out is that there are a number of reported cases where people report that because of gambling problems, they have resolved or into violent behaviors. For instance, in Australia, about 35% of people reported that they've suffered abuse on the hands of their partners, both physically, mentally, and emotionally. And in the study that we've done for KwaZulu-Natal Gambling Board, one of the questions was to ask our respondent if they've been involved in domestic related violence. And 62% of those confirmed that they have, and they were male. So it shows that, if we can dig deeper into problem gambling and one of the consequences, we can link it to gender-based violence.
And interestingly, what this study has also done is to try and look at this from a race perspective. And it's interesting that you've done this because you've got a section that's called Consequences of Gambling on the Family by Race. Which race is mostly affected here?
I must indicate, Xoli, that in terms of the race and the numbers that we have, they are based on the respondents that participated. We may infer to other races, but coincidentally, the top it's black people, followed by Indian communities and white communities.
And what about the divorce rate? Because also that seems to be a major challenge here, based on what I have been reading, that the divorce rate is also sky high.
Indeed, Xoli. Of the respondents, about 39% of women reported that they've actually had to let go and leave their partners. And obviously, one of the reasons why they had to come to those decisions, number one, is because of their well-being, and they were actually scared that they may be, susceptible to various harm or further harm in the family. But also in terms of the child neglect and the exposure of children, in terms of, the continuous fighting amongst the parents or between the mommy and the daddy. It also impacted on children. And later on in life, you find out some of the behaviors that children develop, they would have learned from the parents.
Yeah. And perhaps one of the key aspects, therefore, as to why you are talking on this, particularly on this month of November, which also happens to be Responsible Gambling Month, you promote responsible gambling. What responsibility do organizations or do casinos have to people who clearly exhibit problems in managing their gambling habits?
Not only the casinos, I will actually say all the operators, they are obliged to make sure that to look after the well-being of their punters. And one of the key relationship or partnership that we've got with them, we've got ongoing training with their staff so that they can easily identify people who are exhibiting gambling problems so that they can be referred for treatment. But also, in terms of the law, we've got self-exclusion, where people who've got a gambling problem, they can either voluntarily ban themselves from gambling or their family members can actually approach the relevant courts and ask them to be banned from gambling. So the operators, they play a role because they are at the forefront. They are the ones who actually see and interact with these people. And I must say that a large number of referrals of people who've got a gambling problem, they actually come from the gambling operators. Because one of the key, in as much as gambling has a problem, they realize that it's their investment. They have to look after their punters. Obviously, gambling has unintended consequences, and one of them is violence, and one of them is neglect of the loved ones.
And just in our country, when it comes to the issue of violence, where a partner turns against his or her spouse, what are the figures? What are we looking at here in terms of just how prevalent this is?
Again, I can only relate that to the study that we've done. And it goes back to the number that I've already given, that 62% of the respondents who were made, they've reported that they have been involved in some form of domestic violence. But what is important is that a question that tries to then establish what is the key drivers is the stress, is the fact that they feel that they've let their families down. And mothers, kids, they are there, they are hungry, and you find that the wife needs answers. Why have we not have food on the table? Instead of them dealing with the issue, one of the issue of silencing the partner is to become violent. And they can't help it because of the anxiety and the feeling of their manhood being challenged or being unable to meet to the expectation of the family.
Sibongile Simelane-Quntana, thank you very much for your insights on this particular study that has been conducted. She is with the organization that promotes responsible gambling, and it's called the South African Responsible Gambling Foundation. Thanks indeed for your time, Sibongile Simelane-Quntana.